Let's bring you some breaking news that has come to us in the last minute or so from Buckingham Palace. His Majesty the King has today initiated a full...
The statement arrived without ceremony, warning or explanation. At precisely 9 o'clock, Buckingham Palace confirmed that King Charles had withdrawn Camilla's historic Duchess status from all future household references, ceremonial documents and official communications. Within minutes, phones began ringing behind closed doors. Senior courtiers abandoned scheduled meetings, and Camilla was left staring at a printed page that reduced decades of survival to a single devastating paragraph. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles had approved every word himself. The king read the emergency order twice, then signed beneath a sentence declaring that the change would take effect immediately. A palace statement is an official message, and this one removed the Duchess designation from household correspondence, palace records, and future engagements. His secretary watched him set down the pen. He showed no anger, only exhaustion, because the punishment struck at the woman who had shared his most controversial chapter. Camilla received the printed page at Clarence House, the royal couple's London residence. She reached the first paragraph, stopped, and asked whether Charles had approved the wording. The aide answered yes. Her hand tightened around the paper before she sat down and dismissed him without looking up. The Duchess title had never been decorative to her. It carried the identity through which she had survived rejection, entered royal life, and persuaded the public that she belonged beside the monarch. One phrase made the silence more dangerous. The document cited recent conduct incompatible with the dignity and unity of the crown, meaning behaviour judged harmful to the monarchy's authority and togetherness. Yet it never named the offence. Behind the announcement sat a sealed supplementary file, a confidential record explaining the accusation, restricted to Charles, William, Anne, and 2 constitutional advisers, who guided the sovereign on royal authority. William studied the statement before publication beside a palace window. The prince folded the sheet once and asked whether his father understood what would happen when Camilla demanded a private audience. Charles did understand. He also knew the future king had seen the hidden evidence, while the queen consort had been denied access to the case against her. The announcement spread, but the deeper shock remained trapped inside the family. A husband had punished his wife, a woman had lost the title that rebuilt her life, and an heir knew why. But before the hidden offence could be uncovered, the palace first had to confront the painful truth that this was not merely a dispute over a title. It was a fracture between 3 people whose private loyalties had become inseparable from the future of the monarchy. Behind the official language stood a far more dangerous reality. Charles was not disciplining a distant courtier or removing an expendable advisor. He was stripping away part of the identity of the woman who had stood beside him through scandal, rejection, and decades of public judgment. Yet across the palace, William carried a different burden, protecting the crown from a conflict that had already crossed from marriage into monarchy. Charles understood exactly what Camilla had meant to his life. She had known his loneliness before the institution fully accepted her, and she had remained beside him when every public appearance carried the weight of old anger. The Duchess designation was not simply a royal style, meaning an official form of title used in palace records and public duties. To her, it marked the long road from rejection to acceptance. By removing it, the king had chosen institutional authority over the emotional loyalty that had shaped much of his adult life. Camilla felt the decision as a personal betrayal. She told a trusted aide during a private conversation at Clarence House that Charles had not merely reduced her position. He had punished the woman she had fought for years to become. The Queen Consort believed every difficult engagement, every hostile headline, and every silent compromise had been erased by one administrative order. Her aide tried to reassure her, but she turned away and said the palace now viewed her history as something disposable. Charles felt the cost almost immediately. During a scheduled briefing, the monarch repeatedly lost his place while an advisor explained the next week's engagements. When the man referred to the Queen, he looked toward the empty chair Camilla normally occupied. That small pause exposed the truth no official statement could hide. The royal punishment had already entered their marriage, their routine, and the private spaces where rank had never mattered. William approached the crisis differently. Before entering his father's office, the prince stopped in the corridor and changed a sentence in his notes. He crossed out "your wife" and replaced it with "the crown's position." Succession planning, the system that prepares the next monarch and protects future royal authority, could not be controlled by personal affection. The future king believed Catherine and the next generation had to be protected from any private influence that threatened official order. Anne's involvement made the situation even more serious. Princess Anne had been consulted before the announcement, because Charles trusted her judgment on discipline and duty. The king knew his sister would not soften the truth to protect anyone. Catherine's name also appeared repeatedly in the confidential supporting papers, suggesting that the hidden offence involved an attempt to interfere with the Princess of Wales's future authority. Camilla demanded an immediate private audience, but the answer cut deeper than the statement itself. Charles would see her only after speaking with William and Anne. The Queen Consort read the message twice and understood that their marriage no longer controlled the decision. And as she waited for the audience he once would have granted without hesitation, one forbidden palace intervention began to emerge as the precise moment when private mistrust turned into an irreversible royal emergency. The crisis had not begun with the emergency statement. It began 3 weeks earlier during what should have been a carefully controlled investiture rehearsal at Windsor Castle. One altered seating plan, one private instruction, and one confrontation witnessed by only 5 people transformed years of unspoken rivalry into a direct challenge to the king's authority and placed Catherine at the centre of a decision she had never authorised. Charles entered the rehearsal expecting order. Camilla stood near the front row. William was reviewing the programme, and Anne watched the room with her usual silence. An investiture is a formal royal ceremony in which honours are presented, and every position inside that ceremony carries meaning. The original plan placed Catherine beside her husband, reflecting their shared role as the future king and queen. Yet moments before the rehearsal, that arrangement had been changed. Camilla had privately instructed the Lord Chamberlain's office, the department responsible for organising major royal ceremonies, to move Catherine 2 places back. She claimed the adjustment protected current household precedents, meaning the official ranking used to decide where senior royals stand or sit. One of her personal representatives was moved forward instead. The Queen Consort believed she was defending the dignity of the reigning household, but the decision looked like something far more personal. Catherine received the amended plan without protest. She read it once, folded the paper, and thanked the official who delivered it. The princess understood the insult immediately, yet she refused to create a public argument. Her restraint came from duty, but it also came from pain. She knew that challenging Camilla in front of staff would turn a ceremonial dispute into a family spectacle. William discovered the change minutes later. The prince asked who had authorised it, and when Camilla's name was given, his controlled tone disappeared. He stated that no member of the household could redefine Catherine's official position without the king's approval. The future monarch then walked directly toward the rearranged chairs, where the Queen Consort was waiting. Charles entered at the worst possible moment. William accused Camilla of using ceremony to diminish the future queen, while she insisted she had acted to protect the crown's present authority. The king asked one question: had she used his name when issuing the order? She did not answer. That silence changed everything. An aide produced a document carrying the words "approved on behalf of His Majesty," meaning the order supposedly carried the monarch's personal authority. Charles had never seen it. He dismissed everyone except Camilla, William, Catherine, and his sister, then placed the altered plan on the table and demanded an explanation. Camilla called the wording a misunderstanding, but Anne ordered every related email and note secured. By morning, the king's private office had opened a formal internal inquiry. What began as a dispute over chairs had become evidence of something far more dangerous. And when Charles finally summoned Camilla to answer for it, neither husband nor wife could hide behind ceremony any longer. There were no photographers, no ceremonial uniforms, and no advisors seated between them. Charles and Camilla entered the private sitting room as husband and wife, but the papers waiting on the table belonged to a king and a woman accused of using his authority without consent. For several minutes, neither spoke. Then Charles pushed the altered Windsor instruction across the table and asked the question Camilla had been dreading. Charles had granted the private audience on one condition: no aides, no secretaries, and no prepared defence. The king wanted the final conversation to remain personal, even though the consequences had already become constitutional. A private audience is a closed meeting with the monarch, usually reserved for matters requiring direct trust. This one carried none. He placed 3 documents before her: the changed seating plan, the order carrying false approval, and an email telling staff not to contact William's office until the alteration was complete. Camilla read the papers and refused to retreat. She argued that the reigning household was being weakened by the Wales team, behaving as though the succession had already happened. The Queen Consort claimed she was protecting the authority of the present reign, not attacking Catherine. She accused William's staff of taking control of ceremonies, schedules, and public attention while quietly pushing her toward the edge. Charles did not accept it. He told her the dispute had stopped being about Catherine's chair the moment his name appeared on an instruction he had never authorised. The monarch's voice hardened as he said, She had turned his trust into a weapon against his son. That accusation struck deeper than the investigation because it came from the man whose loyalty had protected her for decades. The king then produced another document. Investigators had uncovered a second directive from Camilla's office requesting advanced control over Catherine's ceremonial appearances. The instructions suggested Windsor had not been an isolated mistake, but part of a wider attempt to influence the future queen's role. She stared at the page before admitting that a senior courtier had assured her such intervention was permitted. Camilla refused to name the figure. She said only that the person worked close enough to Charles to understand the limits of royal authority. The Queen Consort's hesitation created a new fear. Someone within the household may have encouraged the conflict, knowing exactly how dangerous the outcome would be. Charles watched her reach for the papers, then covered them with his hand. He told her they were now Crown records, meaning official documents preserved as evidence of decisions made under royal authority. She withdrew her hand. The king opened a red folder, removed the Duchess order, and said he had approved its withdrawal. The choice was brutal. Camilla could accept the disciplinary statement quietly, or force the palace to publish the fuller explanation and expose every unauthorised instruction. She stood, looked at Charles once, and left without answering. Yet the confrontation did not reveal him as the only source of power, because behind the king's signature stood a small alliance of royals and advisors, who had decided that protecting the crown required limiting her reach permanently. The emergency order carried Charles's name, but it survived because 3 other figures refused to let him retreat from it. William brought the evidence and demanded accountability. Catherine, wounded by the original intervention, refused to seek revenge. Together, their different responses formed an unexpected wall around the king, one strong enough to withstand guilt, marital pressure, and the fear of another public royal scandal. William made the succession argument impossible to ignore. The prince told his father that the crisis was no longer about a humiliating change to Catherine's chair. It was about whether anyone could quietly interfere with the position of the future queen. Succession means the lawful passage of the crown from one monarch to the next, and any attempt to weaken that path threatened public trust in the monarchy's future. The future king warned Charles that silence would make the problem larger, not safer. Anne took an even harder position. Princess Anne insisted that using the monarch's name without permission could never be dismissed as household confusion. She told her brother that rank should create greater responsibility, not protection from consequences. The trusted royal did not demand revenge against Camilla, but she refused to accept excuses that would have ended the career of any less powerful courtier. Catherine chose restraint when anger would have been easier. During a private conversation with William, she said she did not want Camilla publicly degraded. The Princess of Wales had felt the insult personally, yet she understood how humiliation could poison a family for years. She asked her husband to keep the response focused on the unauthorised conduct, not the Queen Consort's past or the pain surrounding her place within the family. William's fury softened, but it did not disappear. He had wanted the full Windsor incident disclosed in the palace statement, including the false use of Charles's approval. Catherine's mercy persuaded him to support the narrower punishment. Still, the prince warned his father that another attempt to interfere with her role would force complete public disclosure. A constitutional advisor then delivered the most unsettling warning. Removing the Duchess designation carried symbolic force, but symbolism alone could leave Camilla's private influence untouched. Constitutional advisors are specialists who guide the sovereign on the limits and duties of royal authority. The king therefore approved hidden restrictions, preventing her office from directing the Wales household, altering joint ceremonies, or controlling precedence arrangements involving William and Catherine. Anne found Charles alone with the unsigned order. She told him that every hour of delay was turning Camilla's misconduct into his failure of leadership. The monarch stared at the page, then signed as his sister watched without satisfaction. Camilla learned that the punishment extended beyond her title. The Queen Consort immediately ordered her staff to suspend cooperation with the king's communications team. The palace had secured the decision, but it had not secured her acceptance, and as her household withdrew from normal cooperation, the punishment moved from paper into the daily life of the monarchy. The first consequences were not announced to the public. They appeared quietly in revised schedules, cancelled briefings, unanswered calls, and doors that no longer opened with the same speed. Camilla had survived years of public hostility. But this was different. The resistance now came from inside the institution she had spent decades trying to enter, and every small change reminded her that the king's order was already reshaping her world. Camilla opened the revised engagement folder and immediately saw what had changed. 3 solo appearances had been postponed. 2 charity visits had vanished, and every future request involving William, Catherine, or their children now required approval from Charles's private secretary. That office is the senior administrative channel controlling access to the monarch and his decisions, which meant her household could no longer act independently. The Queen Consort asked whether the charities had been consulted. Her secretary hesitated, then admitted the instructions had come directly from the palace. The humiliation deepened inside the ceremonial programme. Camilla's Duchess designation had been removed, while several independent appearances were converted into joint engagements requiring the King's approval. A ceremonial programme is the official schedule, showing who attends, where they stand, and what role they perform during royal events. To the public, the changes might have looked technical. To her, they meant the institution no longer trusted her to represent it alone. Charles felt the distance at breakfast. Camilla did not appear, and the King watched the empty chair longer than he intended. He wrote a short note asking her to speak privately, but it was returned unopened. The monarch placed it beside his plate and told the footman not to carry another message. His decision had protected royal authority. Yet every silent room now reminded him what that protection had cost. 2 experienced aides then requested transfers from Camilla's office. They feared that remaining close to her could damage their future inside the household. The Queen Consort understood the message immediately. Loyalty was beginning to feel dangerous. Her authority had not merely weakened, it had become something staff wanted to escape. William received even more troubling news. The senior courtier, whom Camilla had blamed for approving her intervention, had suddenly taken medical leave and stopped answering calls. The prince suspected the absence was an attempt to avoid questioning, especially because the courtier had worked close enough to understand exactly how royal approval should be recorded. Camilla reacted before she could control herself. She rose sharply, knocked a folder from the desk, and ordered the rest of her day cancelled. Once alone, she picked up the fallen Windsor seating plan, but could not unfold it. The document had become proof of the moment her fear turned into punishment. That evening, she sent William a direct message asking to meet without Charles, Anne, Catherine, lawyers, or palace officials. And when the future king agreed to face her without the protection of titles or advisors, the conflict reached the one place palace procedure could no longer control: a private conversation between 2 people carrying decades of unresolved pain. William entered the room expecting resistance, calculation, or another defence of palace protocol. Instead, he found Camilla alone beside an untouched tray of tea, with no papers and no aides waiting outside. For the first time since the crisis began, there was no king between them, no Catherine to protect, and no institution to blame. There were only 2.